Film is definitely my favorite art form, and today I just want to talk about some movies that I personally really love. And I'm gonna do that by discussing my favorite film of every year from 2014 all the way up to last year, 2023. And the reason I'm starting with 2014 is for one, so I can talk about a nice clean 10 movies in this video. And also, I'm thinking of potentially turning this into a series where I go back 10 years each episode. And then after the second one, I would have talked about my favorite film of every year that I've been alive, which I just think is kind of nice. I was inspired to do that by Alpho Media, who did that same concept for their favorite albums, who was themselves inspired by the channel Shuffle Quest, so go subscribe to those guys. And with that being said, let's get on with it. Okay, maybe starting this series with 2014 wasn't the best idea, because this is the most insane year in terms of my movie opinions ever. So, there are not a lot of movies that I have given 5 stars on Letterboxd. Like, to me, a perfect score is only reserved for the masterpieces that I am personally absolutely in love with. And currently, I've only seen 7 such films. But 2014 just so happens to have not one, not two, but 3 different 5-star films. So, I will not get to talk about the insanely immersive and intense filmmaking with probably the best performance I've ever fucking seen in Whiplash. Nor will I get to fumble my way through trying to explain why the quote-unquote one-shot drama, touching on so many different aspects of the human experience while being consistently funny and relatable, is so incredible to me. I'm talking about Birdman or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. Instead, I'll have to talk about my even more difficult to defend opinion on Interstellar, my favorite film of all time. Yeah, I know that's the most normie take you've ever heard, but I just love this, and it's the perfect example of love being blind, because this is probably the 5-star film that I have the most problems with. It is nowhere near perfect. So, before I can start gushing about this, I need to touch on a couple of these flaws. So, if you're not familiar, Interstellar is a film by one of the most beloved modern directors, Christopher Nolan, about a world where everybody has gone farming because natural resources are running dry and humanity has to branch out to space, if you will, to save our species. And to me, this is a very fascinating topic. However, the stance, I guess, that this film takes on this issue is pretty sketchy if you ask me. Like, colonizing different planets is something we should only start doing if there's really absolutely no way to save our own planet. Just letting all the rich people run away from the problems they caused themselves is probably not the best solution. Now, I can suspend my disbelief enough while watching this to accept that in this world there really is no other option, and everybody can join this weird ass space station, not just the 1%. But by even just creating that world, Christopher Nolan is still kind of taking a stance, you know? I'm not saying he actually thinks like this, but I am saying that Elon Musk would probably love this movie. Anyway, nobody wants to hear me talk about the political implications of a Nolan film, so let me just do a speedrun of the other flaws that I have with this. The robot designs are fucking goofy, the love is the only thing that can transcend physics theme is super forced and corny, and they should have probably realized that the water guy only landed there a couple hours before they did because of time dilation stuff from the start. Like, these scientists know how this works, how did they not think about that earlier? Okay, that's it. With all that BS out of the way, this movie does something to me. I can't explain it. It's some super unique and very profound feeling that I just cannot put into words. I know it sounds super corny, but it's true. It's something about the breathtaking cinematography, with these incredible shots giving you a real sense of the emptiness of space, mixed with the amazing performances, like everyone knows about the FaceTime scene, it's something else, mixed with the grand scale of it all and the epic Hans Zimmer organ-infused score. It does something to me, man. Just thinking about it sends shivers down my spine. I've always admired Nolan's ability to tell these grand stories about time and humanity and crazy, insane, genius concepts, but he sometimes kind of forgets the actual humanity of it all. Like, he'll talk about the human race as a whole, but you need those real, three-dimensional, relatable characters to latch onto. And I think he's never gotten that as right as he did here. Murph and Cooper's relationship is so well explored and is, at the end of the day, the real center of the film that everything else orbits around. Get it? Like planets and stuff? Yeah, but those are not the only interesting characters here. Although yeah, the heavy focus on the main characters does sometimes make the others feel kinda flat and useless, but I still really like the Michael Caine scientist guy and his daughter. The conflict of how to continue the human race that they represent is really interesting and is very well explored. But my favorite side character has to be Matt Damon's Dr. Mann. I won't spoil his role in the story, but his motivations are very understandable, and I feel they do a great job at showing the dark side and isolation of space exploration that makes sci-fi so fascinating to me. Speaking of sci-fi, as a huge nerd, I love the way this film grounds its crazy concepts somewhat in the confines of reality and physics. Yeah, there's some inaccuracies like frozen clouds aren't a thing, but overall it does a great job at making these super abstract relativistic concepts understandable to everyone and seamlessly implementing them into a story, which is super impressive in my opinion. Is anyone interested in what I have to say about Interstellar? I should probably stop. I could go on for hours, but yeah, I love this movie. I would still not quite give it a 10. Like, this just has a bit too many issues that I can't really ignore. I have not yet found a true 10 out of 10 film. I'm sure there's one out there somewhere, but for now I'm happy, reluctantly, calling this my favorite movie and giving it a 9.5 out of 10. Let's move on, goddamn. Robert Eggers is a super fascinating director. He's only made 3 films, but they're all incredible. My favorite aspect of his filmmaking is his sheer commitment to immersing you in a time period and setting. The costume design, the way the actors talk, the lighting, it all helps towards making his films feel 100% real, even though there are many fantastical and unexplained elements to them. They're not like overly circle-jerky historical epics trying to be as accurate as possible to the time period. It's more using these settings as backdrops to explore his wild stories and layered characters. Now, your average filmmaker would take a lot of time honing their skill with many films to get to the point of the meticulous detail and creative genius that Robert Eggers is at. But this man nailed it with his first fucking feature-length film, The Witch. This film takes place in 17th century New England, where a family of very devout Christians try to make a living in the middle of the woods, where they get trouble with what they believe to be a witch. Now, if you were thinking of throwing this on as a nice little light-hearted Anya Taylor-Joy flick, I'm sorry to be the bringer of bad news, but everything in this film is sad, awful, depressing, and dark. Literally, it's so fucking dark you sometimes forget this isn't actually in black and white like The Lighthouse. But I love that. It shows just how hollow your life can be when absolutely everything you do has to be 100% in accordance with your faith. And everything remotely outside of those very rigid rules is a manifestation of fucking Satan. It's such a destructive way of looking at the world, and it tears this entire family apart. Now, I won't spoil too much, but the family isn't entirely wrong. There is some supernatural shit going on, making for some really cool but also pretty fucking scary visuals. As at the end of the day, this is still a horror movie. But yeah, I don't have much more to say. This is just a very well-made movie that any fan of horror or historical films should definitely check out. 8.5 out of 10, one of the best debut films ever. The Daniels are some of the most exciting directors working today, as to me, they're some of the only filmmakers who fully understand this time period. I feel like a lot of movies are kind of stuck in the past, not having fully evolved together with the rest of the world for quite a long time now. Aside from trivial things like smartphones and other modern technology, a lot of stuff we see today feels like it could have been written like 10, 15, or even 20 years ago. The Daniels being some of the only ones to fully get meme culture, Gen Z humor, and just the overall zeitgeist of today. Case in point, Swiss Army Man, a film where corpse Daniel Radcliffe helps a stranded Paul Dano by propelling himself with farts, puking water, and getting boners. Yep, this thing's pretty fucking weird. But I absolutely love films that are able to utilize such crazy concepts to explore different aspects of the human condition. This movie is honestly really sweet and emotional. You feel for these characters. Even though one of them is a dead person that doesn't understand that thinking about your mom while masturbating is weird, and the other befriends said dead person. But honestly, there's a lot of universally relatable aspects to Paul Dano's character. I feel like anybody could at least see where he's coming from. Now, this film is absolutely not everybody's cup of tea, and I could totally see how someone could think this is trying too hard and being weird just for the sake of it. But I feel like as soon as you fully immerse yourself in Swiss Army Man's characters, incredible a cappella music, crazy set design, and pretty beautiful cinematography, it truly is an experience like no other. I'm gonna give it an 8.5 out of 10, the best kind of weird ass movie. The other directorial debut psychological horror film to make this list is Jordan Peele's Get Out. Now, I call this a horror movie, but the film isn't really trying to scare you. It's more about getting under your skin and making you think about the pretty obvious messages of racism. Now, what I like about the race relations themes here is that while very in your face, it's not just about the bigger picture, but also about those little, just slightly off interactions that can make black people and members of other marginalized groups just feel awkward and unwanted. I think that's all expressed super well here, even though, as a white guy, I obviously can't relate or really comment on how common or realistic it is. Anyway, enough of the serious bullshit. This film fucking slaps. Let's start with the incredible performances. Allison Williams and Daniel Kaluuya have great chemistry together. The other members of the Armitage family are portrayed really well also. Lil Rel Howery is fucking hilarious, one of the best comic reliefs I've ever seen in a film. And Daniel Kaluuya gives, in general, one of the best performances in cinema history. Like, genuinely top 10 level shit here. That hypnosis scene where it's just him acting his ass off is fucking crazy, dude. Together with the amazing visuals of The Sunken Place, it makes for one of my favorite sequences ever. You just feel so stuck in your seat, so hopeless together with Chris. It's insanely immersive. Now to me, that scene does massively overshadow the rest of the film. Some of the other horror elements are trying a little too hard, and the last act where he just goes around killing everyone is not really necessary in my opinion, but it's overall still a masterpiece and it deserves all the love it has gotten over the years. I'ma give it an 8.5 out of 10, a modern classic for a reason. Come on, do I even need to talk about why this is here? It's got an incredible visual style, it's heartfelt, it's creative, it has some incredible characters, the action is so fluent and awesome, it's really funny, it's the comic book movie that owns that title the most, it actually feels like a comic, rather than just another action movie that happens to be based on one. Bro, that final action sequence where the dimension machine thing is going crazy and they're just like building in trains and whatever the fuck flying all around, goddamn. All the villains slap, I could go on and on. This is what animation and superhero movies needed. A breath of fresh air showing all the studios that you can in fact make creative movies. And it will actually do well, because surprise surprise, people like watching good movies. That's it, I don't need to ramble on any longer about this masterpiece. Everyone knows why it slaps, I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. My favorite comic book movie ever. Parasite is one of those miraculous once-in-a-lifetime films, where it just feels like every single minute little detail is meticulously and consciously placed to make for a near-flawless work of art. Even if it's impossible to pick up on absolutely everything, it's pretty clear that every aspect of the story, these characters, these sets, the cinematography, the score, and so on, is all building towards this grander vision and an incredible critique of class division. Which is obviously what this film is about. The first time I saw this, I was like, makes sense, that's why it's called Parasite. But then as the story goes on, it becomes much more of a question of who's the real parasite. which is of course not a revolutionary concept invented by Bong Joon-ho for this movie, but I feel like it's never been explored quite as well as it is here. But what truly makes this thing so incredible is that this film can just as easily be enjoyed with your brain turned off and just enjoying the ride that it takes you on. This is such an insanely entertaining film that everybody could at least have a fun time with. There's not even really any type of movie enjoyer that I could pinpoint and say they would definitely love this film, because it doesn't really belong to any specific genre. It's kind of all the genres at once. It's a character-driven drama, it's a comedy with one of the funniest and most genius sequences ever. You know the one if you've seen this. It even has a lot of thriller and horror aspects after the crazy 180 this film makes at the halfway point, which I will obviously not spoil, but if you haven't seen this already, what are you even doing? This is definitely my biggest recommendation on this list. Go watch it right after finishing this video if you haven't. Now, yes, I am quite the normie for this being one of just 2 non-American films to make this list, as this is the one everybody has seen. I really need to fill that gap in my movie watching experience, as I know there's a lot more incredible stuff out there, but it's gonna be hard to find something that tops this, as Parasite is easily one of the best films of the previous decade. 9.5 out of 10, I'm so happy this exists. Okay, you have probably never heard of this film, so you might be wondering, is this just a 2020 was such a bad year for movies that they had to grasp for straws and watch something nobody's ever heard of kind of deal? Well, not really, because I actually saw this for the first time a couple years ago in 2021, when me and a good friend went camping near the great Belgian coast for a couple days. Now, it turns out that there's not actually that much to do there on a small budget, so we decided to go watch a movie. However, basically nothing of note was out in theaters at the time, but we did see a poster for this movie called Agente Topo, with the rather confusing title of Best European Film of 2020, even though it's a Chilean film. So intrigued and completely clueless, we decided to check it out. And what we ended up watching was a kinda boring but very sweet yet depressing film about this man who gets hired as a mole agent, a spy, to go to a retirement home to check if a certain woman staying there was being treated well by the staff. But then he ends up struggling to do his job as he forms a connection with a lot of the women staying there. Now, me and my friend actually quite enjoyed it, although we were a bit confused about a couple of things in the film, like the meta parts where the characters talk about being in a movie. That didn't make much sense to us, but it was overall a very memorable experience. But it turns out, as I learned a couple of days later when I looked up this film online, those meta elements were real, and so was everything else, because this is a fucking non-fiction documentary. Now, I don't understand how we didn't realize this, it's pretty fucking obvious, they even basically say it somewhere at the start. But I don't know, I don't watch a lot of documentaries, as you might be able to tell from the lack of them on this list, this is the only one here. And it didn't say that it was a true story anywhere on the poster as far as I remember, so yeah, we were none the wiser. So I always wanted to rewatch this thing with the proper knowledge, but I never got around to it until when I was making this video, when I realized that my favorite film of the year was Tenet, and I don't even love that one that much, so I decided to rewatch this to see if it was better, and goddamn, it definitely is better than Tenet. This has gotta be one of the most underappreciated films out there. So, the actual story behind the creation of El Agente Topo, or the Mole Agent, is that it's a real thing. Elderly people really do get hired as private investigators in retirement homes, and they take on the job because they think it'll spice up their mundane lives a little. Which, yes, going to quite possibly one of the saddest and most boring places you can go to make your life less sad and boring is quite ironic and depressing. But the director, Maite Alberdi, wanted to make a documentary about this kind of thing, but like an actual detective noir type of thing. It just so happened that the person they hired for the job, Sergio, got increasingly less interested in the case and became more and more involved with the people staying there, as there really wasn't anything suspicious going on from the staff. It was a completely useless investigation, so all Sergio really learned is that this place is pretty fucking sad, but everyone working there do a great job trying to liven it up. as you see stuff like the staff calling this particular woman who never gets any visitors as if they are her mom to calm her down a little, which is the most fucking heartbreaking thing ever. Or they throw a party where they crown the prince and princess of the place. And of course, Sergio gets chosen because everyone there instantly loves him as he is just too good for this fucking world. He really wants to help these people and does stuff like giving them pictures of their relatives they haven't seen in so long. So then when he has to leave, it's really fucking sad as he cares for these people, but he has a life outside of this. So yeah, the film just ends up becoming this human display of what goes on in a retirement home. And the extra layer of him technically being there for an investigation, but his reports being more about all the great people he's met rather than the supposed wrongdoings of the staff, makes for a great element of humor, but also just a great display of his genuine character arc. This really is one of those accidentally genius kind of movies. But a lot of what makes this so good can still be attributed to the editing and just the overall willingness of the filmmakers to go along with Sergio and being able to completely change their project along the way. It's incredible, and it just makes for an absolutely beautiful and sad as fuck piece of art about humanity and what it's like to be old and forgotten. I'ma give it an 8.5 out of 10. Underratedly beautiful. Okay, I'm gonna give a quick disclaimer for this one. I wrote and recorded this part of the video before I saw and before Dune Part 2 even came out. And so I kind of like that. I'm not gonna re-record it because I like the fact that I'm like kind of unbiased, not knowing what is to come. But in this section of the video, I talk about like being excited for the sequel and stuff. So because I didn't know how good it was gonna be, but now I've seen it and I do know how good it was gonna be. It's fucking amazing. In the Parasite part of this video, I talked about there only being, was it 6 movies that I've given a 5-star? Well, now there's one more because Dune Part 2 is just that good. So yeah, I just wanted to say that real quick. So back to past me, I guess. Denis Villeneuve is probably my favorite director ever. He occupies a kind of similar space in my mind as Christopher Nolan. They both make these large, epic blockbuster films that still have a lot of heart and soul and are unique, creative, and just fucking good. In an era where every blockbuster is the fucking same and every major studio is just trying to be Disney or Marvel, so I guess just Disney, these are some of the only directors still making worthwhile high-budget films. And I think Denis Villeneuve is probably the best at it. It is fucking impossible for me to decide what my favorite film of his is, but Dune is definitely close. I've never read the book, so all these crazy concepts and worlds are completely new to me, and goddamn were they way ahead of their time for fucking 1965. I mean, this shit is still interesting and relevant to this day. I really want to check out the original at some point, but I genuinely don't want to spoil myself for the Denis Villeneuve sequel, because I love this movie so much. A big reason for that is that this has some of the best visuals I've ever seen. These stunning environments, the incredible CGI, the masterful cinematography with these massive shots that I just want to look at for hours. Watching this on the big screen when it came out was truly special. It just felt like such an experience, which is a feeling that has often been missing in modern cinema to me. But even with this film being so big, there are still many smaller moments that are just as, if not more dramatic and gripping. Like that goddamn scene with the torture box or whatever, which just consists of 3 people acting their ass off with some super bombastic filmmaking, even though nothing is strictly really happening. I totally get why people thought this book, and more specifically this scene, were impossible to adapt to film, especially after the David Lynch adaptation. It doesn't really feel like it should ever work, but Denis Villeneuve did it with flying fucking colors. Even though, yes, he did have to split the story up into 2 parts, because the book is just too long. And I totally understand why some people can't really praise this as much as me without having the complete picture yet. But I don't know, that just doesn't really bother me. I mean, people praise certain seasons of unfinished shows all the time. Why are we so much less forgiving to films with cliffhangers? Personally, it just makes me really fucking excited to see the sequel. It's probably my most anticipated film of all time. But even if that one ends up sucking or it somehow never comes out, that's not really gonna lower my enjoyment of this one. Even with an incomplete story, it's still a fucking masterpiece. I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. The Lord of the Rings of our time. When I mentioned in the Swiss Army Man part that the Daniels are some of the only directors who fully understand this time period, I was mainly talking about this movie. In an age where we can access all information at once through the internet, it can be difficult to truly live in the moment. It's easy to get sucked up into the bagel of meaninglessness, when every moment you can experience is overshadowed by a million other things you could be experiencing right now. No other film is fully able to capture that feeling, quite like Everything Everywhere All at Once, with its insane breakneck pace. However, the Daniels show us a way out. We don't have to choose between living in the moment in this super stressful era where we have to organize our millions of taxes and escaping to the quiet world where we're just a rock existing. We can put our tax papers in the middle, do everything everywhere, as long as we also remember to do now. And I think that's where this film truly shines. Not only is it able to capture internet era humor and the human experience of post 2020 as a whole, it also doesn't put a boomer phones are ruining society kind of spin on it. There's nothing inherently wrong with the stupid ass hot dog finger universe. There's nothing wrong with the I wanna just escape from everything for a bit empty universe. There's not even anything wrong with the universe where the raccoon version of fucking Ratatouille exists. All of these things are valid, as long as we don't overdo it. Now, I get that some people might feel like this film does overdo it, and I wouldn't entirely disagree. Like when director Daniel Scheinert becomes happy through getting his fetishes fulfilled, or when Evelyn unironically says, "I'm learning to fight like you" in the finale. But these are just incredibly minor things. Basically everything else is perfect. This film is funny as hell. The action can sometimes genuinely be cooler and more creative than 90% of modern day action films. The distinct visual styles of all the universes are incredible, and all the actors do a fantastic job portraying their characters. That sounds like a recipe for a 9 out of 10. It's too much, but in a good way. Yeah, this shouldn't come as much of a surprise. Basically, everyone who loves Into the Spider-Verse loves this. They're good for the exact same reasons. Some aspects are actually even better, like the animation for instance. They made every dimension and the characters from them look completely visually distinct. They went so fucking hard with this that at some points I feel like they may have kind of overdone it. I mean, Gwen's entire dimension is crazy visually, with these super contrasting color schemes almost making it look like an oil painting. Everything is just such a fucking treat to look at, especially the action. It's so fluent and incredibly put together. All these spider people webbing around everywhere feels like a fucking ultra complex jigsaw puzzle. It's crazy. I also love how Miles' movements kinda have these imperfect qualities to them, really making him feel like a bit of a newcomer to this whole Spider Man thing. Another aspect that was generally improved from the first one are the characters. They're even more fleshed out and interesting here. I already loved and cared for Miles Morales in the first one, but here he's somehow even better, and that goes for most of the other people too, like Gwen and Miles' parents. But the most surprising character here has gotta be Spot. I love the way he gets introduced as just another villain of the week, and at the start, the movie did a great job of making me believe that. However, by the midway point, it had fully convinced me of how much of a threat this guy really is. He feels fucking terrifying. And I love how after the big moment with the main villain, we kinda switch gears a little, with Miles going to the Spider Society HQ, introducing an entire new villain, Miguel O'Hara. Although I gotta say, I'm not super into the whole canon event BS here. I get it's supposed to be like a theory that you're not fully meant to believe, as Miles is obviously going to break the rules and not completely destroy his universe in the process. But like, everything revolving around the Spider-Man is just a little silly in my opinion. And like, what if Miguel is actually right about it though? We don't fucking know. Are we really supposed to root for a guy who's potentially going to kill everyone? I don't know. Anyway, the setup for the finale is perfect though. The way it all builds up to that final reveal, it just makes me so goddamn excited to watch the next one. Because again, similar to Dune, the unresolved nature of the story really doesn't bother me that much, even if it wasn't very clear from the start that it was gonna end in a cliffhanger. Overall, I don't love this one quite as much as the first. I still think that one is just a little more tight and perfect, but it's very, very close. I'm gonna give Across the Spider-Verse a 9 out of 10. My second favorite comic book movie ever. So that was my second ever YouTube video. I hope you at least somewhat enjoyed it. This took me so long to make. I've basically been working on it since my King Gizzard ranking video, which is like 6 months ago. It should not have taken me this long. I was just on and off working on it. There were entire months where I didn't really feel like working on it. But yeah, I am quite proud with the end result. I think some parts were better than others. I think for some movies I just didn't really have enough to talk about. And a couple of them I just didn't really like represent that well, I feel. But still, I'm quite proud of this video. But I feel like with these first two videos, I've done a great job setting a precedent for what I want like the overall vibe of this channel to be, which is just like, I'll talk about whatever the fuck I want to talk about. So if I'm in a bit of a music-y mood, I'll talk about music. If I'm in a more filmy mood, I'll talk about some movies. I even have crazy plans to like, I don't know, talk about roller coasters, maybe even video games, maybe do some more video essay type stuff. But that's way down the line. I do have an idea for my next video, which will not be as big as this one, because I've just been biting off way more than I can chew with these massive, like almost hour-long videos. Like, what am I doing? I have no experience. Why am I making such long-ass videos? I'm gonna try to avoid that next time, even though I do have some fucking crazy, massive plans in the future. So yeah, that's what you'll be signing up for if you subscribe to my channel. So yeah, now I have some very important stuff to get to, so see you around.